All right. Ben Jones started Unskippable Labs, a division inside Google that helped clients make their ads work as hard as possible on YouTube. Creative is the dominant driver of ROI. Make sure every idea works as hard as it can. Leveraging learnings across millions of ads and billions of hours of watch time, Sundogs, his current company, has built the most powerful and sophisticated creative diagnostics in the world, and he is here to share it with us. Take it over, Ben.
Nice. Thanks, Will. I am going to share sort of general state of the state about what we see happening in particular at the intersection of creative and AI, but I'm happy to talk about anything that anyone is interested in as we go through. So I'll power through this and there'll be time for questions at the end. So you guys have a sense of what we're doing. It's yes, creative diagnostics, creative consulting. I just came from Nike running global pitch. We work with Disney on all their shows and movie launches, and we're doing a bunch of work with L'Oreal and Google. So a lot of big global brands. I'm going to take you through sort of four big areas: unpacking AI, how to think about the problems it solves, where it is in the creative process, and then whatever you guys want to talk about that's interesting to you is interesting to me. First and most importantly, AI is a pattern recognition and probability machine. It does unbelievable complexity can be unpacked in the patterns that it can see across data. Some of the powers that be believe that all of the human data that is publicly available has now been ingested, and there's actually a data shortage, and they're creating synthetic data. But there's also all kinds of unstructured data it's still reading. But a lot is in there, and it's able to recognize patterns in there and then predict what the next thing in the pattern will be. And it does not care what those things are. They call them tokens, but a massive pattern and what is the next thing in whatever sequence that is, which creates all kinds of interesting possibilities and all kinds of challenges if you think it knows things or you imagine it understands things and it does not. And I'll talk to you about what that means. So to understand how any AI system works, there are three components in them. From the largest and most complex, OpenAI and ChatGPT and Gemini and so on, to the smallest thing that somebody's building on their desktop. And those three things are data, model, and prompt. So the data is there enough stuff for us to look into in order to identify patterns? And that is a constraint of any AI system: enough data, a lot of data, the right kinds of data, clean data, et cetera. So the first question about any AI system is there enough data in order to identify a pattern? The second is the model. So how will we ask for patterns from the data? What is the question that we are able to build on top of the model to say these patterns are important and these patterns aren't, so therefore train in the direction of being able to identify these patterns, whether they are Wes Anderson's creative aesthetic, or they are medieval tapestry history, or they are predictive stock market dynamics. So the model is the training on top of data to say what are the patterns, and then prompt is how do we ask for those things? Am I typing in a text? Do I have a structured system? But all AI systems work in this way. There is data where there are patterns, there is a model trained to identify those patterns, and there is a prompt where you ask for the value out of those patterns. As I said, the data part of the world is filling up. I think there's still a lot of room, but at the sort of biggest level, that's a place where people believe there's constraints being introduced. A lot of the innovations now are in the model layer. So how we train to identify patterns, that's getting cheaper and easier and faster. If you guys read about DeepSeek, the Chinese model, the miracle was that they had trained it really quickly and really cheaply, and you didn't need so many computer chips to do it. And then all of the innovations now, particularly around agentic AI, which is an AI that can do things by itself, are around prompting. They're around asking a question and then the AI being capable of asking itself to break a problem into steps and solve those pieces and then synthesize the outputs. And I'll give you an example of that. So this is an example of a pattern. Wes Anderson has an aesthetic universe: shapes, colors, cinema angles, et cetera, et cetera. He has a whole very clear aesthetic. And I think the first thing that blew my mind in AI was mashing together aesthetic universe. So Darth Vader in the style of Wes Anderson, it is one aesthetic universe, the Star Wars one and the Wes Anderson one. And to imagine that there was a machine that could jam those things together in a way that had some aesthetic sensibility. It was the first time my brain was like, I cannot believe that this is a thing that can happen, and is exciting. So very complex pattern, a pretty simple prompt. It's literally this prompt, and then I did it again, but asked it to sort of increase the style, and got this, which is awesome, and remarkable. And so, okay, now I can take two aesthetic universes and join them together and get a, pretty good synthesis of that. That is an interesting challenge or problem to get an AI machine to solve creatively. So I was in Korea, and I didn't know much about Korean aesthetic universes. This is a Korean landscape painter, Jae Seung. He's the most famous. I was like, most famous Korean painter. And it's this guy. He's got a very distinctive style. And so I thought, well, one of the problems people are interested in solving with AI is localization. So I can take a thing at a global level, and then I can, mash it up with local cultural signals or local historical elements or aesthetics, et cetera, and there will be magic that'll made because it'll create all these efficiencies. So I was there, and so I did this, Darth Vader in the style of Jae Seung, right? If they can do this mashup with Wes Anderson, it can do that with Jae Seung. No, it can't. It turns out there's no trace of a Korean landscape painter in this model. It's terrible at it. Which means one of two things. It means either this guy's paintings are not in the model, so that there's a hole in the data, or there's a hole in the training, where the training model has not said, hey, let's identify all these aesthetic universes so that we can mash them up and combine them together. But if you imagine that an AI system could magically localize your creative, it would work in a place where there was Wes Anderson. It would not work in Korea, and I've done it in Poland and some other places where I've been traveling. So I pushed it. I was like, well, maybe if I ask it to really amp up the style, it'll get closer. And the answer is it does not. In fact, every time I've tried to do that, it puts in rain for some reason. I don't really know why. But it shows you, as you think about, data, I'm pulling patterns from model, how is it trained, and then prompt, how am I asking for it? How to identify holes in any system. I always think it's a good test for AI to ask it to design a tour of your hometown, anything that you know super, super well, and you can see what's in the model and what's not, and what's in the data and what's not. So it's good at pretty good things and not good at highly specific things. Different example, I ask it to create a close-up of a luxury watch face displaying the time of 7:35. Pretty good on luxury watch face. Time totally wrong. Why does this say 10 after 10? Because that is the time that is on 99% of the watches that show up on the internet, because it makes the watch look aesthetically pleasing. So AI does not know what time is. It doesn't know how to read a watch face. It doesn't care. It is predicting that this is what that says when I ask it to display a time. And it's a really good example of like the short circuit logic of a prompt and a model. So this was one of the image generators. I went into Claude and I asked the same thing. And this was actually pretty amazing, because I said, you can see the prompt in the left here, create an image of a luxury watch face displaying the time of 7:35. And it wrote an application in real time without me asking. Like, it kicked out code and the code appeared and it generated this as a code-driven watch face, the time. Not right. But it was fascinating to see that it would code an application. I'm not a coder, build all this code, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty interesting and remarkable to see where this, the model is taking what the ask is and where it goes. So 2 weeks ago, or last week maybe, I was headed into Soros Fund Management, and I was talking to a bunch of investment analysts, and Matt helped me put this together. So I went to one of these engines and I said, imagine I'm an investment analyst, give me a report on energy dynamics in Central and Eastern Europe for the next 18 months, and consider these things: political and economic dynamics, technological advances, et cetera, et cetera. And it's pretty remarkable, because this takes you through the process. And so it shows you that it's going to find these sources, so you could correct the sources if it doesn't work, and then what it's getting from those sources, and then the questions that still remain, and then the synthesis of those things. And it goes through a very elaborate, pretty remarkable, and you can see the sources here. You can see, oh, I got this from this search and this from that search, and now I'm reading those searches and now I'm bringing them together. And I talked over this and terrified the set of analysts, but it goes very far in, and the report is really good, and it takes, literally the time. It took about 5 minutes. And you can say these sources aren't good. You could correct the sources. You could say the synthesis is not good, but it creates a pretty powerful force to push against, to say, am I better than this? How much better? Why am I better? How quickly is this getting better? So therefore, how quickly do I need to get better? Pretty remarkable. And they left terrified, which was my goal. One of the challenges of this, though, is the tools are being built by people who don't have subject matter expertise. The people who have subject matter expertise are not spending that much time with the tools. So there's this little overlap of the people who actually know, what it takes to tell a story, what it takes to make an ad, what it takes to produce an ad, stay on brand, et cetera. Most of those people are not spending their time with these image generation tools, and vice versa. And so the tools can do amazing things, but they're not very good. And the people who can do good things are not, at this point, building their careers around the tools. But this dynamic is changing pretty quickly. So as you think about AI and what it can solve and what not, and it does amazing things, but it can't tell time, like, well, how do you think about what it can do? This framework I found super helpful, puzzle versus mystery. So a puzzle is anything that has a closed system with stable rules and fixed outcomes. And these can be incredibly complicated, like landing on the moon is incredibly complicated, but physics is pretty consistent. Gravity is pretty consistent. And if you solve all of the equations and you machine all the parts, like, you should be able to land on the moon. Search, I think, is a puzzle. It's not a mystery. And these things are things that AI is really good at. They're very good at that. So in puzzles, the more data you have, you get a little bit better, a little more incremental upside in ways that can have great complexity. So like search, you should just turn over to AI and let AI do it. There's not a human intervention that makes a ton of sense from my perspective on that side. And then mystery, on the other end of the spectrum, are open systems with chaotic dynamics and variable outcomes. So a thing that's just looking for patterns and providing prediction on those patterns, if there aren't patterns or the patterns aren't consistent, rules change, outcome change, it's not as good. So culture is a mystery. Emotionally driven storytelling, I think, is a mystery. And in these circumstances, more data doesn't help. Like, you can feed it in, but you won't get improvement because you added data. And usually the improvements on the mystery side are breakthrough. They're not incremental. It's not I get 2% better and 3% better and 2% better. I have an amazing idea, or I understand something about culture, and suddenly, like, the whole system of culture changes. And so AI good at puzzle, AI bad at mystery is a way of understanding how to apply it and what problems it'll solve. If you treat a mystery, that is a chaotic system, like a puzzle, you get the same answer for everyone. All the cars look the same. It's why dating is so atrocious on these apps, because you have a checklist. Does somebody match your checklist when the things that are going to actually connect me to someone are not the checklisty things? So if you are using puzzle logic AI to solve a mystery, emotionally driven storytelling, you're going to get crappy answers. But in the same direction, the same problem in the other direction. If you treat a puzzle like a mystery, you treat something that we can solve and know, like no one can possibly know the answer, then you're going to waste time and effort solving solved problems while you don't focus where there might actually be magic. Like, we know, from 1,000 experiments with the car brands, that if you show more of the interior of the car and less of the running footage on the Pacific Coast Highway, you'll increase the performance. Like, people want to see it, and that's not what's in the ads. And if you say, it doesn't matter, I'm going to invent this platonic car ad that's never been seen, and you show the same running footage on the same Pacific Coast Highway stretch, like, your ad's going to fail. We just know. So put your energy someplace else. Don't put it in a place where there is data. Data has proved we've gotten to an answer that's good. I think the challenge of AI is it's because of the complexity it can handle, it's rocketing from the left side to the right side. And so we're at the sort of edge of mystery. What can it solve and what not? And the people who are super amped about AI are like, oh, it can solve everything as long as we pump enough data in. And those of us who live in the world of mystery a little bit more don't think that's true. But figuring out where we are and what problems we're trying to solve is kind of the core challenge or opportunity of AI. As you think about the funnel through that lens, then I think we did a whole bunch of research that said ads that accomplish different things are different. So an ad that drives awareness is very different from an ad that drives consideration, is very different from an ad that drives action. One 15-second or one great 30-second is not going to do that. Very few ads accomplish 2 objectives. None accomplished 3 or more. And so what we've started to do as we look at this is push apart those types of ads and say very top of mind awareness, like brand awareness, not a emotion driving 15 or 30, but just raw, am I getting my brand in your brain, is a puzzle. It's not a mystery. And you should build a machine that does it, and it should be super efficient so that you can give your energy to the place where human energy is going to be the most powerful consideration. And that shouldn't be a 15 or 30. It shouldn't be a 60. It should be 2 to 3 minutes long or longer. And it should have all this human imagination and human energy in it. And you should make it beautiful, and you should hire the best director you can, and it should be gorgeous and awesome. And then the further down to the bottom of the funnel you get, that in the action area, the more puzzle-like it becomes. So the more I have an intent signal and I know you want a blue minivan that has these features and those features, it becomes a data crunching problem that, again, you should build a machine for. And so rather than start at what you used to think is the top and create a set of 330s and 315s, there is a top above that where you should build a machine, and then the middle should expand, should be richer and deeper, and then down below that should be a big performance engine that you're sicking the power of AI on in massive ways. In this world, sort of as you look at companies who are doing it well and not, Klarna is probably creating the biggest headlines. They've cut the size of their company in half. They've increased the revenue per employee by 70%. A lot of it is because they use AI for customer support, but they're also using image generation for all their ads, CRM, et cetera, et cetera. And you can talk about the ethics of that. I have huge problems with the ethics of it. I think it's easier if you're a financial services company as they are, so you don't have to have a thing that looks like a thing or a thing that looks delicious. It's already abstract, but they've been very aggressive about it. And so then a lot of CMOs are like, well, why aren't we seeing a 50% reduction in headcount and an increase in revenue and so on. So they're pulling gravitationally into this puzzle pit that the machines are running. The future out of this, there are 3 questions as a creative. I think the first question, when will it beat you? Which is the John Henry question. Like, it's not going to beat you now in video. You're going to write a better script and you're going to shoot a better thing and it's going to be beautiful. But for how long is that? And then the second question is the steam drill question. When will somebody less skilled using AI beat you? And the question of beat you is, on what dimension? Are they going to make something faster and cheaper? Definitely. Are they going to make something as good? Probably not. But are they going to make something faster and cheaper and good enough that, it creates loss for you? Probably. Certainly the biggest danger. And the third question is, when will you plus AI make something entirely new? So when will you get out of the faster horse and into something that we haven't invented yet or thought about yet, something that is new on the other side? And we don't know the answer to that question, but that's what's interesting about this stuff. These are just observations about where AI is hitting. If anyone had one product that would do everything for everybody, we'd all know about it. So there isn't, don't worry. There are 1,000 point solutions with 1,000 complications, and then people who are good at each one of those in different sorts of ways. But roughly you can see it moving through pretty quickly. The price of pretty good is approaching 0. I think this year at some point we'll see video that's pretty good, but the cost of great is still the same. The cost of a fantastic script that is, beautifully tuned to culture, that is gorgeously shot, that has not reduced significantly in cost or time. And so this is creating this super intense friction, especially as we have a lot of technocrat CMOs who are not as wedded to great storytelling, maybe brand building, want proof of how things work, et cetera. So this is the sort of conundrum at the heart of the creative process right now. The other thing is opportunity varies with creative complexity. So here on the left-hand side, you can see like how much AI can help you basically. And along the bottom is how complex creatively it is. So if you think about text, then functional text like search you should be able to just have an AI do it and have a human look at it. You should turn over that part of the engine to them. Expressive text, like the text that would go into a display ad, maybe. Again, quite a strong role for AI, but reduced. And then distinctive, like a beautiful print ad or an anthem print. You can get help with it, but you probably are going to need a human to do it. Image, more complicated. It can do some functional, but you should have, sort of, it's an AI assisting a human. Expressive imagery, less powerful. Distinctive imagery, even less. And video, least of all. So video can accelerate the process of getting to a functional video, less good on an expressive video, and almost none on a distinctive video. So it's important to know where you are, what your goal is, and what you're trying to do. And this is a sort of short map of the creative process and the areas where I see AI improving quality. So it can make strategy better. I don't really think it improves ideation quality very much at all. It improves pre-production a ton. You can do casting, you can do location scouting, you can do unbelievable storyboard fidelity. You can figure out all kinds of questions and problems at a much higher level, much more quickly, much more robustly. Execution, I don't really think it helps that much in the video creation process. And optimization, it can help some, but it's still a pretty complex mode of storytelling to diagnose. And then speed. It can get you to strategy faster. It can accelerate your ideation. It can make pre-production somewhat faster, execution somewhat faster, and optimization it can increase a lot. So you can start to see it moving up in these categories as different tools come out. I don't know if you guys have seen this Porsche spec ad from Laszlo Gal. It's he used AI to generate the script. All the shots are AI generated. This is coming up on pretty good. Like, it's still not an ad that anyone would run, but the quality of what's showing up in here, considering it's a set of text prompts knit together, is pretty good.
Pietro always had a flexible neck, just like his father and his very curious grandfather. All of the men from the Pisanos had this gift. This talent earned them fame in the village, even if it might not have been completely true. At 18, Pietro became a tennis judge, which was at least safer than his cousin doing neck tricks at the local circus, and less tiring than his nephew. Well, never mind. Older women were just laughing about it. Younger women were curious, naive, and idolizing. Many people argued about how the Pisanos did it. Some suspect.
Anyway, it goes on. It's not a great ad, but again, characters are interesting. I think the tonal range is pretty consistent in ways that are surprising to me. If you watch the whole thing, at the end, he created a whole set of fake behind the scenes, so crane shots and drones and so on, that all also is generative. And it's quite clever. It's quite clever. So if he's here now, where will this be 6 months from now, a year from now? By the time you spec'd out a script, could you replace it with something like this? I don't know, but it's getting better fast, and you can see from this where it is. And I think the challenge against all this is, once you dig the tunnel, no one will climb the mountain, right? Once I can type in a thing, get a pretty good thing, am I ever going to spend the time and the craft to hash out exactly what I want, have it be distinctive? Maybe there'll be this handcrafting thing. Maybe those long form ads that I talked about will be awesome and incredible. But it's not clear. And right now we have a lot of tool makers who are digging tunnels. And those of us who are sort of up the mountain or climbing up the mountain are like, oh, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel good, but it's interesting. And so that's what I got. That's what I got. I got 400 more slides here, but I'll stop there and answer questions. And
that was awesome, Ben. Wow, really interesting. I have one question about the concept of mystery that I'm intrigued by, because I think you've given a label to all of our intuition that is AI is really good at some things, but it's not good at the human things, including creativity, which is important to all of us. Do you think that, or were you saying that AI will never get to mystery, or were you saying that it just hasn't yet?
It is moving that line from puzzle into mystery. And I think many things that we would have thought were mysteries a year ago, AI can already do reasonably well. And so the question is, how far into that territory will it be, and what is the preserve? Is AI going to be able to predict what is likely to generate an emotional response in a way that feels creative? Yeah, it is. Is it going to be as good as a human? Certainly going to be as good as a mediocre human or a pretty good human. Is it going to be as good as an awesome human? No, probably not. And then that same tool in the hands of an awesome human is going to be able to do something awesome. But it's moving closer and closer. I don't think it'll get there finally. I think I think we'll learn to use the tools to push out and create more leverage. And I think fewer people will be able to do more. But I think there's always going to be a human element in it.
I have a follow-up question on that. So the mystery piece, because that was where I was living. I was like, okay, I'm only going to be over here in mystery. Is it able to analyze mystery and break it down into something less mysterious and therefore repeatable or replicatable, or is that how it would get closer to invading territory?
Sure. I mean, we designed a program for Oreo where we were trying to have Oreo live at the sort of broadest base of the entire internet as we could. And we built an AI copywriting engine that trained on the Oreo brand voice and read page content. And it was a pretty simple dynamic of like identify a thing on the page and have a sort of this or that you copyright out of it. And we built, one engine that could generate copywriting like that in the Oreo brand voice. And then we built another that stack ranked those outputs by brand voice. So you wouldn't get anything, bad or pornographic. And I'm sure if you had a super talented writer, they could write some lines that were better, but a junior copywriter who's got to crank out 5,000 lines, like it could crank out 5,000 pretty good lines.
Yeah. Great. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that crisscross thing was the thing I keep talking to Ben about, and I've talked to Al's on the call. I've talked to him about it, and Will I've talked to as well. Is that crisscross, and it feels like, first of all, the internet a million years ago, like people like, what the hell is this? And then it also feels a little bit like, I hate to bring it down to Photoshop or Director or pick your poison along the way. The notion is these need to be in the hands of trained professionals, and I'm sorry, Lance isn't here. He made this comment a million years ago. He said, you ought to have to get a license to use Photoshop. Like you shouldn't just let anybody use it. But the notion is, I've had access through Ben to VO2, which is the 4K video thing. And it has changed. It has changed in the time I've been using it. And my ability to tell a story with it has gotten slightly better, but you can make mountains of crap. The problem is, I think some of the crap would be, as Ben said, good enough for a pizza shop. So what we need to do is put these tools in the hands of people who could make it unbelievably great and realize exactly what it is. And the problem is we have a natural aversion to it. So we're like, that's not really my thing. I'm like, if you had it in your hands, it would be spectacular. That is the whole difference. I think that is the thing that doesn't stop the train, but it puts creatives in a position to be where they belong, which is driving it, because it's like a bionic arm. It makes them that much better. And I made 1,000 videos and 3 are good. Like, I'm just saying.
Well.
Two.
I have a question, and I think I know the answer, but this is not my area of expertise. Do you think these tools will ever get to be closed gardens so that people that have cultures and practices and stuff that consistently exceed the other people in the industry, whatever industry that is, aren't just teaching AIs to be able to do what their culture and processes do? Like, is it gonna be private tools at some point, or is, by the nature of what it does, is always going to be local? So, I mean, global. So anybody using it is just feeding the future capabilities of the tool itself.
So in order to have what they call a frontier model, one of the big models, ChatGPT, Gemini, et cetera, you need a lot of data. And if you're in that game, it takes $100 million and warehouses full of GPUs. No one has the resources to do what those frontier models can do at that scale. So, someone who has got a network of 40 people in a small community is going to be able to train up a model. But you can take tools and, they can make a unique thing. There are things called LoRa's, which are like little models that you train within constraints and so on. But you can't train a big model without $1 billion and warehouses of GPUs.
Yeah, so it'll always be global.
Well, and all these big organizations are making the bet that it's the picks and shovels to the gold rush, and they want to control it, and they're investing in ways that no one else can match. I mean, the European Union can't invest enough to build a competitive model. So, I don't think we probably have much chance.
Any other questions?
I think it's really interesting how you broke down the idea of mystery versus a puzzle, because as you pointed out, it's a probabilistic, which means it's kind of shaking dice and kind of predicting what the dice are going to come out like. What I found as a creative is you shake the dice and every time it comes out different when you just want another slightly different version of the thing you liked. And it's in when you put it that way, which is that it's a mystery. It is solving it is going out and making a guess from scratch almost every time. And I know that there seems to be models now where they basically, you can kind of save some things and so it won't. I think the character, the generation of characters and even landscapes or vehicles or all that kind of stuff, but you seem like you would want to have a library, or you'd want to feed a library.
Yep.
And it doesn't seem either the people who are designing this stuff aren't thinking that way. It's just, I'm just amazed that it is such a crapshoot every time you put in a prompt. It feels like there's enough structure to enough things. I mean, there's the famous book by, I forgot what his name was, Story. He wrote a whole book about how stories are constructed. So that, I read a lot of detective novels and they have a probabilistic model that, there's a red herring, there's a profile, the detectives are usually some kind of loser, so in some ways you could outline the structure of a novel, but then you would fill it in with your own details. It's sort of the randomness of it that I find kind of frustrating.
But Al, that's because the things that you're playing with are these frontier models that are solving every problem in the world. There are tools where you can put in characters and control characters and have characters be consistent, or settings or products. You can have the background change and the product be consistent. They're just sub tools that are changing all the time. And so if you wanted to do that and you did that, you could get a good one. You could train a model on a detective for detective fiction and have the computer spit out, probabilistic detective stories that fit that character in that tonality with that vocabulary, all that stuff. And then you could, again, add in your own layers or tweak or change. But that's why a good you plus the tools is going to be better than the tools by themselves or you by yourself.
Yeah.
I love that theme. And I'm taking that from this talk is that, and it's what Matt was saying earlier and what you just said, Ben, that if talented people grab hold of this stuff and aren't afraid of it, they'll do much better things than, nothing against pizza shop guys, but the local pizza shop.
The challenge of it is the tools are changing so quickly, like it's not exactly my job, but it's kind of my job to keep up. And as Matt said, like the tools change month over month. You almost got to relearn them. You got to plug back in and see how they're giving you what you got before. It's hard.
Yeah, well, the good news there is that nobody's an expert. At any given moment, no one is an expert.
But here's the twofold. One is Ben taught a class at BU and I went and sat in the back with Annie, and the questions were not, this was creative. These are supposed to be creatives. The questions were about tools. They were tool questions. What do you think about this versus that? It was a mid-journey question. It wasn't about, so a little concerning that the next gen is totally focused on tools. And two, if history is any clue, the half good bullshit is gonna take over really fast. Yeah. Like good enough car commercial is coming. And my feeling is, as Ben said, you got to put it in the hands of people, you guys got to have it. You got to be in this stuff and be driving it, because we're looking at this guy, Laszlo Gall is sort of, we call him the white rabbit. We're all chasing him. And there's a couple other, but he told a story about Porsche, and it took me 3 times going through this to figure out it was a story, and it wasn't really that good. Everything was beautiful, but the ad really, it wasn't there was nothing emotional. It was just he's a great practitioner. So we all know people who made ads like that. The people who make the hamburger helper ads are awesome. They work and all that. You want great talent, great writers, great film people to have access to great tools fast. And it's very important now. It's not like we don't have time for people to push them off. They need to get in them and start driving you know what's good? This is good. Look at this. We need that.
More of that. All
More
right,
of
we got to
that.
end it right there. Just be respectful of everyone's time. Ben, thanks so much for doing this. Really, really appreciate it. And Matt, thanks for the intro. You guys think of who might be our next speaker in a couple of weeks. I'd love any ideas that you guys have. But Ben, that was just terrific. Could we get a copy of that presentation?
Sure. I'll send it to you. Nice to
Awesome.
see you
I'll
guys.
send it around. I'll
Thank
post
you.
this
That
on
was
YouTube too.
amazing.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Brother. Bye-bye.